All right, so we've had about 60 days of wrapping our head around the quote unquote new normal. That seems to be the phrase that a lot of people are using. And I think, at the beginning of this whole pandemic, we had 14, 15 days of panic as everyone tried to understand like what do we have to do? What is the way around this? How do we navigate all of this uncertainty? But one of the things that um, really stands out to me, and the reason that I'm particularly delighted to have you on the show with me, Jason, is the fact that you're posting. I've been following. You're posting these screenshots of inventory and sales and dealerships who are merchandising in a certain way or are following your program and figuring out a way to navigate this. And I thought it was particularly inspiring to see like, hey, if you follow a strategy, here's what's possible. And so I want to turn this over to you and say, okay, well, what from your vantage point and your experience, what is the difference between the dealers that are still managed to sell? Some of them broke records in April
Yeah.
versus those that just kind of got stuck in this perpetual hyperloop of not knowing how to navigate all the uncertainty.
Well, the biggest difference is a lot of our dealers that we've been doing this now for almost 7 years, and we try to keep dealers what we call lean and clean. Carry what you sell what you carry. If you got 100 in stock, let's sell 100. So the benefit of a lot of our clients have been with us, and some of the screenshots I've been sharing, some of these stores are selling, I think the last one was selling 90 with 58 in stock, and only 35 of them are fully photoed ready for sale. So I
Wow.
think those type of results right now are because dealers aren't in a rush to go buy. So they're getting some volume going. And these dealers would typically, instead of just having the 50 or 60 in stock, would probably have 80 or 90 in stock and still selling that 90, except for the fact that they're just not really replacing or at the level that they used to. So they're getting real efficient with what they have, which is great because, again, it's cash flow. If they can maximize their cash flow and keep some of the money at the dealership and not have to be tied up in the bank and not be tied up in inventory, that's going to get a lot of dealers through this successfully. So a lot of our stores, I was just talking to one of my guys this morning, I think on pace with 120 sales with 70 or 80 in stock. And they used to have to carry 120, 150 to do that type of results. So I think a lot of dealers are getting more efficient in their process, streamlining it better, and getting better results out of their people. Because I think a lot of people too, to be honest, might feel a little bit threatened, obviously, with their jobs and stuff, to where they're making sure everything's tight because they don't want to lose, their job, and making sure they're staying on pace. And so I think everybody's getting a little bit extra out of everybody and extra out of their inventory and stuff too. So
Yeah. And
that's
does
been.
this is this like affected by um have you seen an effect on trades and things of that nature? Is there a different way that we need to be navigating the whole trade scenario in a time like this, where obviously the consumer on a lot of these inventory, if I'm the consumer, I know what I'm into the vehicle for, and I know what I need to get out of it. Maybe I'm negative equity, maybe not, but I
Mhm.
ultimately know, hey, well, here's what the vehicle's worth, and maybe we're in a situation where dealers can't necessarily give what that vehicle is worth. Have you seen, is there a shift in how we need to be dealing with trades and things of that nature?
Well, yeah, there's been a big shift overall with just having to do trade-ins, not necessarily sight unseen, but different ways to do them. We had one of our dealers that actually, because they didn't do a whole inventory guaranteed valuation on their website, have to drive to the consumer to appraise their cars and stuff like that. So trades are going to be tricky because a lot of it's wrapped around new car business. You can get trades on used cars, but depends on, again, what kind of used car you're selling. If you're selling a 2012 or something, you might get an 2008 with 200,000 that you don't retail out of. So new is usually where the trade-ins are being driven from. New, a lot of it's down. And even though they have these big incentives, a lot of people with the economy and layoffs, are happening. So you definitely want to make sure you're maximizing your appraisal process, making sure you're capturing every appraisal, making sure if you bump the trade that you're documenting any information on the vehicle, photoing it. Just make sure you're tracking and trending that, because it's usually the most important thing that happens on the showroom floor that doesn't get tracked as effectively as other things, but
Right.
yet it affects how many used cars you have in stock, your gross profit, your volume sales. So trades are getting trickier. But there's obviously, not that this is a good thing, but there's an abundance of vehicles available out there in the market. So it's kind of like the housing market. You finally get to sell at the top of the market, but then when you go buy, you're also buying at the top of the market. Right now it's at the bottom of the market. A lot of these wholesale values have dropped 10, 15, 20%. So trade-ins are worth less too. So, and some of these consumer sites hasn't caught up to that.
Yeah.
KBB might say it's worth 15 grand and it's going for 10 at the lane right now.
Right. And I was going to ask you about that. I mean, how would you navigate that with a customer who ultimately is going to still be using tools like KBB or one of the other trade appraisals who haven't maybe caught up to everything that's going on? Is there a way to navigate that with customers? Is it just education? I mean, my mind always goes to, I saw a couple of reports where obviously we're still en masse, like kind of generalizing here, but I mean, we're still dealing with this stigma of, well, they're just going to tell me what they need to say in order to make the deal work in their
Yeah.
favor. How would you suggest a dealer navigate the whole trade scenario, helping the customer ultimately understand, yeah, like that tool might be saying that, but they're not understanding these elements?
Well, I think it's going to be a double-edged sword because one, if I was a dealer, I'd probably grab some articles to back up my Wall Street journals and articles and things like that that do show the headlines of values being dropped. Two, you can run MMR sale reports and share that with consumers if you want to be open and show them, hey, here's 20 that just sold at the auction for this amount, along with the articles can help back that up. And again, our communication skills are going to be so important because right now you don't get to see eye to eye with the customer. You can't just sit them behind the desk, get a body feel. A lot of times you can just tell by body motions and eye contact, what if they're upset, if they're not, and if you can, if you're winning that battle. So a lot of this is going to have to be done over phone and email. So sending that communication out to the customer. The bad thing is, the double-edged sword is, well, they could say, well, then why am I paying this much for your car? So it's going to be a balancing act, and that's where communication is going to be so crucial. I just realized that over the last week or two. um, I spent 8+ years on the retail end. In 1997, 1998, I was selling cars off the internet, and don't tell me I can't sell a car off the internet. I communicate it real well over emails
Right.
and phone. So I know I could sell a car off the internet before, 2000s we were doing that. But it's going to be even more important nowadays because you're not sitting behind somebody and you don't get that body language. You can't cater to them. You can't give them a drink and, make them happy. It's going to be a tough, and so again, going back to trade-ins and overcoming that, it's a lot of communications. And then, yes, I'd be very upfront. I'd show them maybe some MMR run list sales reports. I would show them some headlines about the volumes of vehicles and the decline of them and the abundance of the supply, and try to win them over that way. But it's going to be a tough battle.
As you were speaking, one of the things that came to my mind, and maybe this has nothing to do with it, no bearing at all, but I just thought about how for so long, this is a, this is an indication of how good we had it, that we had to create a whole debate for as long as it lasted around millennials,
Yeah,
in the industry. But I
yeah,
almost thought, well, hey, maybe this is actually an advantage, or it turns out to be an ultimate advantage because millennials know how to communicate really well over text and
sure.
digital mediums, where if we just get them up to speed on the process, maybe they'll have a much more effective chance at communicating effectively. And the communication piece that you're talking about really intrigues me because I feel like, especially this day and age, people that feel like they're over communicating, it actually turns out that they're probably just barely communicating enough.
Hmm.
And so I love what you're saying. Like, hey, we don't have these certain things at our disposal right now, like the human to human, like in person, looking you in the eyes, sitting across the desk or whatever. So I'm going to have to go deeper on the whole demonstrating transparency however I possibly can. And I love what you're just talking about, the practicality of, well, like, hey, let's just gather a file of social proof. Here's some articles. Here's some links you can check out. Here's the MMR sales report that we have. Here's what we're seeing. Here's all the things that we're considering as we look to make a deal. And I think ultimately consumers are going to be pretty open to that.
Yeah.
I think to your point, like the one thing that I think comes out of this whole deal is that we are now being encouraged due to these circumstances to give our customers the level of transparency that they've been expecting for quite some time as it is. And it might be uncomfortable for us, but I think change is always uncomfortable. Evolution can
Hmm.
always be a little bit uncomfortable, but ultimately it's going to be a very positive thing for all of us. um, you had mentioned the wholesale market. I mean, what do you see as it stands there? There's going to be there's obviously a huge surplus of inventory. How do you navigate the wholesale market? Is there still a place for that? Do we have to navigate it differently? Are we looking at different things? Like how are you looking at wholesale and or auction type stuff right now?
Well, the data is so skewed because retail drives wholesale. Okay. And a lot of people think it's opposite. Whatever they buy at wholesale, is what they try to sell on retail and mark it up. But retail drives wholesale. So the retail hasn't been there yet. And so all these values that you see, MMR is doing a data point of what percentage of MMR a car is going for. Essentially, you get MMR value. Let's say it's 10 grand. And if the car is going at the lane at 9 grand, they say it's going 90% of MMR.
Right.
Well, the problem is eventually MMR gets down to the 9 grand it's been going for. So then instead of 90%, you see this MMR index at 100%. So you think the market's gone up because it's gone from 90 to 100, but all it is MMR reset itself. The other problem is just because, if 50 cars ran and only 6 of them sold for 10 grand or 9 grand, whatever that number is, are they really worth that when the other 40 didn't sell? So that's what you're not seeing. There's so much no sale happening, like upwards of 75+% of no sales happening because of the floor, the caps that anybody. So even the values you see right now aren't true values when there's that much no sales going on, because that car is really not worth that, or at least until the retail starts picking back up and everybody's at the lane starting to grab stuff. It's kind of like the stock market. You wait till it's, buy low, sell high. You wait till it's low. These no sale, maybe they're rental car companies with fleets trying to dump these cars, and they want 12 grand and the highest bid's 10, and so all these no sales are happening. Then all of a sudden 10 turns to 11, and then do they hold out, or they just go ahead and go ahead and start dumping them and letting these things fly? And it's probably going to be 60-90 days at least before we actually see a more stable wholesale information. So that's the hard part. NADA retail, Kelley Blue Book, all of them are pulling from these auction data. And so you got to pull it from somewhere. I understand banks and loans and all that's got to get their number from somewhere, but
Right.
it's almost obsolete right now until a higher volume of cars start selling there. But that's not
Yeah.
going to happen until retail happens.
You're going to see what do you think? You're going to see a huge volume of Hertz vehicles start entering the market. I'm seeing some rumblings about a Hertz bankruptcy.
Yeah, I just posted an article last night about that, and they had a cap by today to file, and then I think it got pushed to May 22nd furlough. But even in that article, it states, just like any other company, I think Gold's Gym is going to be in that scenario, Macy's and stuff, that if they file bankruptcy, they still get to operate. It's just a way to rearrange their debt and loans. So if they still get to operate and work through that bankruptcy, that they're going to obviously keep a good chunk of their cars, because they're going to have to, still try to figure out a way to. So, yeah, I mean, but there are still a lot of fleet rental car companies that have tried to dump them because they've got to get either the new models replaced and stuff like that. So, and then of course, ride share. I see a big uptick in, road trips and things like that. And even business travelers, if they can be more regional, they'll probably take their car. Who wants to get in an airplane right now and then go get in a rental car, who knows had it, and then go sit in a hotel that God knows who's been in, that kind of thing. So I just think a lot of road trips are going to start happening, and maybe these late model cars start selling
I'll tell you
that
what,
way.
we're already doing the Cirillos are doing road trips like it's the 80s right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, what else do you do as a family? You can't go
Yeah.
anywhere. The parks are closed. All these sorts of things. So it's like, hey, let's go explore. Let's go take a road trip.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I think the funny thing that this pandemic has highlighted is that pre-pandemic, people used to like make not make fun, but just like tell me to calm down because I'm a bit of a germaphobe as it is. they'd be like, oh, come on, calm down. Yeah. So the dude doesn't wash his hands at the movie theater and then go straight to the concession. Like, we get it. They're disgusting. And I'm like, no, that is super like, I'm not touching. I am walking through the theater like this.
Oh, wow.
And now this pandemic happens, and now everybody, I kind of go like, one little pandemic happened and everybody now knows how I feel all of the time.
Yeah. Like the
And so
introverts, all of a sudden the introverts going, see,
man.
it's a good world, ain't it?
What you're saying about airplanes and stuff, like, that's me on an airplane as it is. I just kind of like, can I buy this whole row just so I don't have to,
Well,
and
our state parks are still open. So we have a camp, we have a big fifth wheel camper, and we've had it for a few years and didn't get to use it much last year, but yeah, we've already used it once. We got 2 other trips planned. And because again, it's your own vessel, right? It's your sheets, your blankets, your food, your kitchen. I mean, it's your own stuff. And that's why I told my wife, I'm like, I'd rather drag this thing around, and we've had it for years and we've camped a lot, but I'd rather carry this thing around instead of flying somewhere and getting somebody's hotel and stuff. We can just have our own space.
Now, this brings up a good point, because I mean, as far as pre-owned specifically, I feel like, what we're seeing here is people have realized, see, when times are good, your vehicle is a luxury. It's like, oh, this is so nice, I've got a vehicle. But I think very quickly we realized, well, wait a second, this is freedom. Yeah. My vehicle is utility. I need a vehicle. And you had mentioned ride sharing. I mean, Ubers are sketchy, 95% of the time as it is. I think a lot of people are realizing, hey, there's more utility in this. Do you see this then, just based on financial situations and things of that nature, from some of the data that we're seeing? Do you think now this means a bigger uptick in pre-owned moving out of this, and maybe less luxury buys? Like, hey, yeah, I did lease the whatever, but now I'm thinking like, maybe I just need to go for something that's a little more cash responsible, a little more, gives me the utility and gives me my own space that I can control.
Yeah. And that's where I did an article a couple weeks ago. I think CPO can be the winner out of this thing if done properly. And what I mean by that is, if these manufacturers, because they got to realize, I know they want to keep their volume of new car sales, right? I mean, they have to,
right?
But a lot of the manufacturing, the plants were closed or switched over to a different product, right? Creating masks and stuff like that. So the production's been down. So one way to drive your brand still is through CPO. So I was saying, if the manufacturer should actually put as much attention and maybe money behind CPO cars, offer the same, maybe instead of 0% for 84 months, but 0 for 60, maybe waive the fee for the dealer to certify the car, maybe do a 90-day deferral payment program. If you put a program like that out there for consumers, and the new cars, even though they have the great incentive and the customer might want it, but the production's not there to provide it, that's a good switch car. And so if they put this money behind it and push CPO, you're going to get dealers buy-in, because again, if they waive the fee, that's the biggest challenge. A lot of dealers, they didn't want to spend the extra 500 plus money to certify a car, because then the gross isn't there.
Right.
And then you're going to get the buy-in of the dealer, the consumer. It's a good alternative because they save thousands and get good rates. And then it's a good intro car. Maybe they drive the CPO for a few years, and later down the road, they feel comfortable to go into the new model. And what it will do is that trickle down effect. It'll help stop all these rental cars, and all these lease returns are going to come hit this market, and it's going to make these values drop. Well, if the 20s and the 19s drop, well, then the 18s and 17s drops, and so forth. And they need these values to hold, because they need the residual values, right? The future value of that car to hold, so they can run leases on new cars. So I do think used cars will win out of this, because they've had this 0% for 84 months. I don't know. There hasn't been a big volume of sales like it. I remember 9/11 in October. 9/11 happened in September. October was the first time they ever offered 0%. And I was doing internet sales, and I remember coming in my office, and on my phone, literally at 8:30 in the morning, there'd be 10 voicemails and 40 emails, and people are just flooding the market buying cars. That hasn't happened yet, because I don't think people feel comfortable leaving their houses and doing it that way. So that volume hasn't happened on new cars. And so I don't know if it will. or if it's just waiting for people to be able to be more comfortable to, okay, I'm going back to my job, my income's secure, now let's take advantage of these offers. Or if it's not going to come, then yeah, I mean, they're going to have to do something. And some of these manufacturers had done some CPO offers. I think Volkswagen, I heard Volvo or Mercedes-Benz, and some of them are starting to do that. But I think CPO could become the winner out of this thing if handled right. And again, that's the used car alternative because of budgets and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, we see just from an interest level, yeah, it's great that there's all these new vehicle incentives and payment deferrals and all those sorts of things. And I mean, that's certainly that's a great thing for anybody that's in a brand new vehicle. But I'm even seeing just from say like a Facebook marketplace perspective, where a lot of dealers, of course, are putting their pre-owned inventory, that surprisingly there hasn't been too big of a decrease in people still reaching out to dealers on these pre-owned units. And I think that's just an indication of what you're saying, like, hey, this is going to hold, and maybe this is going to be the shining star of this whole pandemic, and it's going to hold us through until people start to return to the market, or maybe more comfortable leaving their home, or like whatever the case may be. But I mean, if we look at the historical data from 08, 09, it was kind of like it was a bumpy road 08 and 09, and it was in 2010, 2011 that we started to see the engine turn back on a little bit. And so yeah, I
But
think
they
pre-owned,
did that cash for clunkers though, and they
yeah,
can't do another round of that. That'll just
no,
kill. It would kill the wholesale values of these used cars, and because the new car business, and then new cars, you won't have as many trades, and I mean, it's just gonna, it would not be a good thing. And even Dale Pollock did an article about similar
right,
thing. What I was saying, cash for clunkers will kill it. Let's put
yeah,
something behind these late models.
yeah. And and you know what? Like just the whole psychology of like I bought a like who's attracted to buy now, not to sound judgmental, but I mean like I'm a marketer. So it's like who's honestly interested in hey, you know what? Like I'm going to go buy a clunker. And it's like
Yeah,
okay, but then think about all of the cost behind servicing a customer that wants a clunker, because they usually have the highest expectations to begin with.
sure.
You know,
Well, and
so I
then
think
too, I mean, a lot of those cash cars are going to be important for some people though right now. Because think about a lot of people, especially in the city and stuff,
yeah,
with rideshare, they might go, you know what, I'm better off just buying a 3 or 4 grand car and just letting it sit. If
totally.
I use it, I use it. I don't. But it's better than getting in these Ubers or taxis right now.
Totally.
So
Yeah. And it brings it right back to the validating point of your vehicle is a utility. Like this is
hmm
it's a need, it's for freedom, and you need it. So I think that's interesting. Now I want to kind of pivot a little bit and say, okay, obviously there's a lot of dealers saying, well, I've got the inventory I've got. If I was to shift anything, if I wanted to shift my focus, what should I be doing right now, especially as dealerships are starting to open up, or sales departments are starting to open up by appointment? Of course, there's regulations in place to keep everybody safe and all those sorts of things. But if I'm opening up, what should my focus be over the next 30, 60, 90?
30 and 60, I think obviously, share what you're doing on these cars. If you're doing these chemical or the cleaning and getting rid of, and a lot of these new companies are out there, making sure the bacteria, there's everything's clean. You do the gloves, you're doing the mask, you're doing everything you can to protect the customers. I think over the next 30 to 60 days, they need to hear that kind of message. So push that out there. Don't be afraid to do videos and show customers. Even if it's a Facebook video or a YouTube video for your website, if it's a 2-minute video, or even if you did a live and no one watched it, that's fine. It's something to capture to send the customers, 20 days down the road, say, hey, check out this quick video, show you how clean our car is going to be when we bring it to you, type of scenario. So let customers know what you're doing on that end. And then again, I think just appraisal process is going to be important, because you're going to have to figure that out. A lot of times, again, some of these, if customers aren't coming into you, you got to come to them, and figure out how you can transact and do the money on that. And what I'm hearing from a lot of people is the customers are a little bit more laid back as far as not beating them up on pricing. And it's like, holy cow, well, maybe you're doing business the way they want to, and they're willing to spend a little bit more money for convenience, So promote that convenience. Again, the cleanliness of the car, the convenience of coming and getting it from them, and that they don't have to leave their home. I think they'll pay for that extra convenience. So I think, but the other thing right now is price is driving cars. I would almost say if you can get aggressive with your price, get off of it, even if you're taking a beating because of what you paid for that car a while back, take that first beating, because the second and third for now over this next 6 will be, you'll be profitable by the second transaction. What I mean by that, if you take a $3,000 beating to price this car to get off of it, but you can go to the lane and buy it $3 or $4,000 cheaper and price it competitively and make 1,500 or $2,000 on it, by the second or third transaction on that 20,000 investment, you're breaking even and you're getting out of this. I'd hate to be that guy 60 to 90 days from now, still sitting on cars that he bought in February that are worth way less. Yeah. So get off of what you paid high for back in January, February, and the beginning of March. Get off of it now, get very competitive with pricing, move it, and then go to the lane and buy cleaner stuff. You always want to be a buyer at current market values, and it's never been as more important than now.
I love this perspective because I really feel strongly about this as well. Like you're not, I think too many people are going to try and hold on to the money, and they're not realizing the depreciation of the vehicle, the cost of having it sitting there, the fact that what you just said, current market value of this thing, like you're doing more damage to yourself than just taking the hit. And yeah, it's not going to be comfortable, but just you're doing what you have to take. The monetary wherewithal is not going to be there right now, but you got to get out of this thing. You need to be able to move forward with current market value vehicles.
And the more you can then promote that, like I say, if you just say, well, I'm going to sit and maybe the market comes back and then I'll make my money. Well, there is a thing called holding cost, right? And it's $30, at least 30 to 50 bucks a day sitting on your lot. So at 30 bucks a day and you hold it for another 100 days, that's $3,000. Not only are you hoping that the market comes back $1,000 or two, but you just spent $3,000 for sitting it, versus selling something now, taking that $2,000 hit or $3,000 hit. Even now, you can replace it cheaper, but now you got a customer that bought something from you. Again, you can promote, let people know what you're doing, that they see other people out there buying cars from you. So, then obviously it's not that big a deal. So maybe they'll buy a car from you, type of thing. So I think you need to promote that you're still in business and people are buying cars and they're getting great deals. And then, so when you come out of this thing, again, you're lean and clean and you're buying at current market values and not hoping. I always say this, not to be political, this is just a campaign slogan. Obama's hope and change strategy, I always say that doesn't work in used cars. You can't hope that somebody comes in and pays too much for your vehicle, or that the market changes somehow and all of a sudden becomes more valuable. The hope and change strategy doesn't work in used car operations.
Yeah, I think that's hilarious. And also, to that point, I love that you're bringing up strategy, because this is often the part that we don't talk about enough when it comes to business strategy, that sometimes business strategy is going to include having to cut something loose and take a hit on it so that you can move forward. And I love just that you said several times this lean and clean, because that really is the ultimate strategy for a lot of things. Like, I want to run my business lean and clean so that I am more flexible to be able to do certain things. Mm-hmm. And if anything, I think this whole experience has maybe pushed that reset button to help us realize what ultimately matters most. Like, focus your attention on the things that matter most. And this idea of lean and clean is something that should be at the forefront of our minds constantly.
Yeah. Well, I started with Viato in 2005, and I was one of the first employees. I mean, the good and bad of it. The good of it was, Viato took off during the recession, 08, 09, because new car sales just fell off the cliff and dealers needed to find a way to survive, and that was used cars. Right. So it was good and bad watching it, because I watched, some of my clients lose their Chrysler franchises, try to turn into used car operations, watching dealerships close up doors. And but it was a benefit but here's the dang thing, here we were just over the last couple of years having record months. And I'm like, man, you guys forgot what 08, 09 looked like. Why are you running so sloppy with your inventory? But they could, because, they always say that the, worst habits form at the best of times. And, I kept seeing dealerships. I'm like, my gosh, guys, you need to clean up your inventory. You need to worry. And, and now it's the reset, now all of a sudden everybody remembers what it was like 08, 09. And the processes are coming back in place and the lean and clean becomes a benefit again. I just
Yeah.
hope it lasts longer than just a few years, like after the recession. But
How quickly we can forget, huh?
mm-hmm.
Lest we forget. That's going to be this is going to be the whole thing, this once in 100-year experience that each of us have experienced together. I hope we don't forget, and I hope more businesses, myself included, really focus on what matters most, and that we don't forget the lessons that we're learning, because I think honestly we have been gifted opportunity on a silver platter, and there are those that are going to see it that way. There's those that are going to be stuck in the whole doom and gloom of it, and they're just going to revert to their old ways, and they're not going to have come out of this any better. And I hope that's not the case, but I mean, just historically we see that happens. Man, this has been a total delight. I'm so glad that you were able to join me here on the Dealer Playbook podcast. How can those listening get in touch with you and learn more about what you do?
Easy. J Rice at lotpop.com. And, or I can even give my cell 314-568-2754. But also, on YouTube, we have a channel, Lotpop Inc. And man, there's over 200 videos on there.
Wow.
Some are 2 to 5 minute tips. Some are interviews with dealers, similar to this interview here, but, a ton of free information out there of, how to run your inventory over the last 4 or 5 years worth of videos. So there's a ton of content there.